In the empty hallways of Riverside High School, a quiet 16-year-old girl was about to face her worst nightmare. What started as another day of trying to blend into the background took a shocking turn when 3 bullies cornered her after school and demanded she remove her hoodie. Zhang wasn't your typical shy new student. For 8 years, she had spent her life training in Muay Thai under her military father's guidance, known for her devastating precision and 17 national championship titles. When Gavin Harris and his friends grabbed at her clothes in a twisted humiliation ritual, they had no idea they were about to unleash a hidden weapon. Lily's transformation from trembling victim to unstoppable force would happen in less than 10 seconds and leave all 3 boys crumpled on the floor. What began as calculated cruelty would become a complete power shift. The halls of Riverside High would never be the same after the quiet girl with the worn backpack revealed she could break bones as easily as she broke boards. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn air carried the scent of dying leaves as Zhang stepped through the double doors of Riverside High School, her worn backpack slung over one shoulder and her dark hair pulled back in its usual simple ponytail. At 16, she had perfected the art of invisibility oversized hoodies that concealed her surprisingly athletic build, eyes that rarely met anyone else's, and a practiced way of moving through crowded spaces without drawing attention. This was her 7th school in 10 years, and she had learned that the best strategy was always the same. Keep your head down, blend in, and count the days until graduation. The hallways buzzed with the familiar energy of teenage hierarchy. Groups clustered around lockers, their laughter echoing off the institutional green walls. Popular athletes strutted past with their letterman jackets, while theater kids gestured dramatically near the bulletin boards. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they belonged in this small-town ecosystem. Everyone except Lily. She clutched her schedule tighter, searching for room 204 while trying to ignore the curious glances that followed her. In a school this size, a new face was an event. Whispers trailed in her wake speculation about where she'd come from, why her family had moved here, whether she'd fit in with any of the established cliques. Lily had heard it all before in 6 other schools across 4 different states. What they couldn't know, what she would never tell them, was that beneath her quiet exterior lay years of disciplined training. Her father, Master Sergeant David Zhang, had insisted she learn to defend herself from the time she could walk. The world isn't always kind to those who look different, he'd told her during their first lesson in their garage dojo when she was 8 years old. But strength isn't about hurting others, it's about protecting yourself and those who can't protect themselves. Lily had taken those words to heart, dedicating herself to Muay Thai with the same intensity her father brought to his military service. By age 14, she held a national championship title and had earned black belts in multiple disciplines. Her compact frame, which made her appear fragile to casual observers, was actually a weapon honed through thousands of hours of training. Her seemingly delicate hands could break boards, her legs could deliver devastating kicks, and her reflexes were faster than most people could track. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was surviving another new school without incident. As she navigated the maze of hallways, Lily became aware of a particular group commanding attention near the main staircase. 3 boys held court like royalty, their voices carrying over the general chatter. The obvious leader was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of confident swagger that came from never being challenged. His dark hair was styled with careful precision, and his clothes screamed expensive casual. This had to be Gavin Harris even. Without introductions, certain types were universal across schools. Flanking him were his lieutenants, a wiry boy with calculating eyes who seemed to catalog every person who passed, and a stockier companion who laughed too loudly at everything. The leader said, They surveyed their domain with the casual arrogance of predators who had never encountered anything that could threaten their position at the top of the food chain. Lily kept her distance, but she could feel their attention shift to her as she passed. The conversation quieted, replaced by the kind of appraising silence that made her stomach tighten. She'd seen this before the moment when bullies identified fresh prey. "Well, well," came a voice that dripped with mock interest. "Looks like we've got ourselves a new little mouse." Lily didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge the comment. She'd learned that engagement, even defensive engagement, only made things worse. Instead, she quickened her pace toward the relative safety of her first period classroom, her sneakers squeaking softly against the polished linoleum. But she could feel their eyes on her back, could sense the wheels turning in their heads as they sized up this new addition to their hunting grounds. The quiet girl with the second-hand clothes, and the careful way of moving that screamed easy target to anyone looking for someone to torment. As Lily finally reached her classroom and slipped inside, finding a seat in the back corner where she could observe without being observed, she tried to push down the familiar knot of anxiety in her chest. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe she could make it through senior year without incident, graduate quietly, and disappear into whatever came next. But even as she opened her textbook and tried to focus on the teacher's introduction, she could feel the weight of attention from the hallway lingering like a storm cloud on the horizon. Gavin Harris and his friends had noticed her, and in her experience, that never led anywhere good. The irony wasn't lost on her, a girl who could disable grown men in seconds, sitting in a classroom and hoping to remain invisible to teenage bullies. But that was the choice she'd made long ago, to be the quiet one, the peaceful one, the girl who solved problems by avoiding them rather than fighting through them. She just hoped that choice wouldn't come back to haunt her. The incident happened on her fourth day at Riverside High, just as Lily was beginning to hope she might slip through the semester unnoticed. She was standing at her locker, trying to wrestle with a combination that seemed determined to jam, when a shadow fell across her. "Having trouble there, army brat?" Lily's fingers stilled on the lock. She didn't need to turn around to know who was speaking. Gavin Harris's voice had already become unpleasantly familiar from her observations over the past few days. She could feel him looming behind her, probably flanked by his usual companions, Bradley Moore and the one they called Jake. "I'm fine," she said quietly, not turning around. "Just need to get the combination right. Maybe if you weren't so scrawny, you'd have the strength to work a simple lock." Bradley chimed in with a snicker that sounded forced, like he was performing for Gavin's approval rather than expressing genuine amusement. Lily's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She'd dealt with comments about her size before at 5 feet 2 inches and barely 110 pounds. She'd heard every variation of tiny, weak, and fragile that teenage creativity could produce. What they didn't understand was that her compact frame was an advantage, not a limitation. Her father had taught her that size meant nothing when you knew how to use your body as a weapon. But she wasn't going to use those skills. Not here, not now, not unless she absolutely had to. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," Gavin said, his voice carrying an edge that made other students in the hallway slow their pace to watch the developing confrontation. Lily finally turned, keeping her expression carefully neutral. Up close, Gavin was even more imposing, at least 6 feet tall with the kind of athletic build that came from football practice and weight training. His blue eyes held the cold calculation of someone who enjoyed exercising power over others, and his smile was all teeth and no warmth. "There we go," he said with mock approval. "Now here's the thing, new girl. This is my hallway. These are my lockers, and you're in my space." "I was assigned this locker," Lily replied evenly, holding up the slip of paper with her locker number, "by the office." "The office doesn't run this school," Jake interjected, stepping closer. He was smaller, Then Gavin but carried himself with the nervous energy of someone trying to prove his worth. "We do." Lily could feel the familiar surge of adrenaline that came before a fight, the heightened awareness, the way time seemed to slow, the automatic cataloging of her opponent's positions and potential vulnerabilities. Gavin was strong but probably slow, relying on intimidation rather than actual fighting skills. Jake was quick but unbalanced, likely to overcommit to any attack. Bradley seemed the most reluctant of the three, following along out of social pressure rather than genuine malice. She could have ended this confrontation in seconds. A quick strike to Gavin's solar plexus would double him over, leaving her free to deal with the other two before they could react. Her father's training had been thorough. She knew exactly how to neutralize multiple opponents, quickly and efficiently. Instead, she took a slow breath and looked down at her feet. "I don't want any trouble," she said quietly. "I'm just trying to get to class." "Smart girl," Gavin said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Keep that attitude and we'll get along just fine." He reached out and slammed her locker shut with enough force to make the metal ring like a bell. The sound echoed through the hallway, and Lily could feel the weight of dozens of stares from other students who were pretending not to watch while hanging on every word. "Run along now," Bradley added, emboldened by Gavin's display of dominance. "Wouldn't want to be late for class." Lily gathered her books and walked away, her movements steady and controlled despite the rage building in her chest. Behind her, she could hear them laughing, the kind of cruel laughter that followed successful intimidation. Other students quickly looked away as she passed, already learning to avoid association with the school's newest target. As she made her way to her next class, Lily became aware of someone walking parallel to her path. A girl with shoulder-length brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses had fallen into step beside her, close enough to talk, but far enough away to maintain plausible deniability if anyone asked if they were together. "I'm Tessa," the girl said quietly, not looking directly at Lily. "Tessa Williams. I saw what happened back there." "I'm Lily," she replied, grateful for any friendly contact, even if it came from someone who was clearly being cautious about being seen with her. "Gavin's been like that since middle school," Tessa continued, still looking straight ahead. "He gets worse every year. The teachers all think he's some kind of golden boy because he's the quarterback, but he's basically a sociopath." They reached the intersection where their paths diverged, and Tessa finally looked directly at Lily. Her eyes were kind but worried, like someone who had seen too much casual cruelty and felt powerless to stop it. "Just be careful," she said. "Once he decides you're a target, he doesn't usually let up. Not until he gets bored or finds someone else to torment." Lily nodded, appreciating the warning even though she already understood the dynamics at play. She'd seen Gavin's type before, bullies who ruled through fear and maintained their position by constantly asserting dominance over anyone they perceived as weak. What they didn't know was that she wasn't weak. She was choosing to appear weak, which was an entirely different thing. But that choice was becoming harder to maintain with each passing day, and she could feel her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack around the edges. As she slipped into her classroom and took her usual seat in the back, Lily caught herself flexing her hands, a nervous habit that reminded her of the power she kept hidden. She thought about her father's words about strength and protection, about the difference between violence and self-defense. How long could she keep choosing peace over justice? And what would happen when that choice was taken away from her? By the end of her second week at Riverside High, Lily's daily routine had become a carefully choreographed dance of avoidance. She'd memorized Gavin's schedule, knew which hallways to avoid between classes, and had identified the bathroom on the third floor that was usually empty during lunch. But despite her best efforts to remain invisible, the bullying was escalating. It started small, deliberately bumping into her in crowded hallways, knocking books from her hands, making loud comments about her appearance or clothes whenever she passed. Gavin had recruited others to his campaign of harassment, turning her torment into a group activity that provided daily entertainment for anyone looking to curry favor with the school's reigning social hierarchy. Tuesday morning, she found her locker had been jammed with gum. Wednesday, someone had written "freak" across her notebooks in permanent marker. Thursday, Bradley had accidentally spilled chocolate milk down the front of her only clean hoodie. During lunch, forcing her to spend the rest of the day in a borrowed shirt that was 2 sizes too large. Each incident was calculated to be just below the threshold that would bring adult intervention. Nothing technically violent, nothing that couldn't be dismissed as accidents or teenage pranks. But the cumulative effect was wearing on Lily's carefully maintained composure. She found herself lying awake at night, staring at the ceiling of her new bedroom and thinking about the heavy bag hanging in their garage. Her father had set it up before leaving for his latest deployment, just like he had in every house they'd lived in. "Remember," he'd told her during their last training session, "discipline isn't just about learning to fight. It's about learning when not to fight." But those words were becoming harder to hold on to with each passing day. Friday afternoon, she was walking to her last class when she heard Jake's voice behind her. "Hey, China girl. Your daddy send you. Any kung fu moves in the mail?" The casual racism hit her like a physical blow. She'd dealt with ignorant comments about her mixed heritage before, but something about Jake's sneering tone and the laughter that followed made her vision blur. With rage, for just a moment, she imagined spinning around and introducing his face to her elbow. The fantasy was so vivid, she could almost feel the satisfying impact. Instead, she kept walking, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. It was Mrs. Ortega who finally offered her a lifeline. Maria Ortega taught a P history and had a reputation for being one of the few teachers who actually cared about her students as individuals rather than just test scores. She was in her 40s with graying hair and the kind of warm smile that made students feel safe opening up to her. During Lily's 3rd week, Mrs. Ortega asked her to stay after class. "I've been watching you," she said without preamble as the other students filed out. "And I can see that you're struggling with something." Lily shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I'm fine, Mrs. Ortega. Just adjusting to a new school." "I've been teaching for 15 years, Mrs. Ortega replied, settling into the chair next to Lily's desk rather than staying behind her teacher's desk. "I know what adjusting looks like, and I know what being targeted looks like. Which one is it?" The kindness in her voice almost broke something in Lily's chest. For a moment, she considered telling Mrs. Ortega everything about Gavin and his friends, about the daily humiliations, about the rage that was building inside her like pressure in a kettle. But she'd learned long ago that adults rarely solved problems like this. They just made them worse by intervening in ways that gave bullies more ammunition. "It's nothing I can't handle," Lily said finally. Mrs. Ortega studied her for a long moment. "You know, I was bullied in high school too, different reasons, but the feeling is the same. That sense of being powerless, of having to endure whatever other people decide to dish out. What did you do about it?" Lily asked despite herself. "For too long, nothing. I told myself that ignoring them would make them go away, that if I just kept my head down and didn't cause trouble, they'd eventually get bored and move on to someone else." Mrs. Ortega leaned forward slightly. "But bullies don't get bored, Lily. They get emboldened. Every time you let them push you around without consequences, you're teaching them that they can push a little harder next time." Lily felt something cold settle in her stomach. "So what are you saying? That I should fight back?" "I'm saying that there's a difference between causing trouble and standing up for yourself. And I'm saying that sometimes the only way to stop someone from hurting you is to show them that you won't be an easy target anymore." That night, Lily stood in the garage facing the heavy bag her father had left behind. She'd been avoiding it since the bullying started, afraid that using it would somehow make her more likely to lose control at school. But Mrs. Ortega's words echoed in her head as she wrapped her hands and took her stance. The first punch felt like coming home. The second released some of the tension she'd been carrying in her shoulders. By the time she'd worked through her full routine jabs, crosses, hooks, and the devastating elbow strikes that were the signature of Muay Thai, she felt centered for the first time in weeks. But she also felt something else, a growing awareness that her strategy of passive avoidance was failing. Gavin and his friends weren't getting bored, they were getting worse. And sooner or later, they were going to push her past the point where she could choose not to fight back. As she unwrapped her hands and headed inside, Lily caught her reflection in the garage window. For just a moment, she saw not the quiet, unassuming girl she'd been pretending to be, but the fighter her father had trained her to become, the girl who had won 17 national championships before she was 16. The girl who could end a fight before most people realized it had started. The question was no longer whether she would have to use those skills. The question was what would happen when she finally did. Because deep in her heart, beneath all her careful control and disciplined restraint, Lily Zhang was getting tired of being anyone's victim. And when a trained fighter decided to stop running, the people chasing them rarely knew what hit them. The breaking point came on a gray October afternoon when most students had already left for the day. Lily had stayed late to finish a chemistry lab, hoping the empty hallways would provide safe passage to her locker, and then to the parking lot where her mother would be waiting. She should have known better than to think Gavin would miss such a perfect opportunity. Well, if it isn't our favorite little mouse," came the familiar voice from behind her as she fumbled with her locker combination. All alone in the big scary hallway, Lily's stomach dropped. She'd been so careful about avoiding them during school hours, but she'd let her guard down in what she thought was the safety of an empty building. She could hear multiple sets of footsteps approaching, not just Gavin, but Bradley and Jake as well, their voices echoing off the institutional walls with an ugly anticipation. "Come on, guys," she said without turning around, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline beginning to surge through her system. "Just leave me alone. I haven't done anything to you." "Haven't done anything?" Gavin's voice was mockingly hurt. "You've been disrespecting us for weeks, China girl. Walking around like you're too good to acknowledge your betters. Acting like you're invisible when we're trying to have conversations with you." Bradley laughed, a sound that held no humor. "Maybe she thinks she's some kind of ninja. You know how those people are." The casual racism hit her like a slap, but it was Jake's next words that made her blood run cold. "I bet she's got all kinds of secrets under that baggy hoodie," he said with a leer that made her skin crawl. "Maybe it's time we found out what little Miss Mystery is hiding." Lily spun around then, her back pressed against the lockers, and faced her three tormentors. They had positioned themselves in a semicircle, blocking her escape routes with the practiced efficiency of predators who had done this before. The hallway suddenly felt impossibly long and empty, with the nearest classroom doors seeming miles away. "Stay away from me," she warned, but her voice came out smaller than she intended. For all her training, for all her father's lessons about confidence and projection, she was still a 16-year-old girl facing three boys who were bigger than her and operating with the casual cruelty that came from never facing real consequences. Or what? Gavin stepped closer, his blue eyes glittering with anticipation. "You'll tell teacher?" cried a mommy. "Face it, freak, there's nobody here to save you." What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Jake lunged forward and grabbed the hem of her hoodie, yanking upward while Bradley moved to pin her arms. They clearly expected her to freeze, to submit to whatever humiliation they had planned, to become another story they could laugh about later. Instead, something fundamental shifted inside Lily Zhang. Years of disciplined training kicked in like a switch being flipped. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. When peaceful options are exhausted, when someone threatens your safety or dignity, You have not just the right, but the responsibility to defend yourself." The transformation was instantaneous and terrifying. Jake had barely finished pulling at her hoodie when Lily's elbow connected with his solar plexus with the precision of a surgical strike. The impact drove all the air from his lungs and sent him stumbling backward, gasping and clutching his chest. He'd been expecting a frightened girl's weak struggles, not the devastatingly efficient strike of a trained martial artist. Bradley, still reaching for her arms, found himself grabbed by the wrist and twisted into a painful submission hold that sent him to his knees. The leverage was perfect. Lily's compact frame actually gave her an advantage, as she used his own momentum and weight against him. His confused yelp echoed through the empty hallway. Gavin, suddenly realizing that his easy victim had become something else entirely, swung a wild haymaker at her head. But Lily had been sparring against grown men since she was 12 years old. She ducked under his clumsy punch with fluid grace and drove her knee upward into his ribs with enough force to lift him off his feet. The entire confrontation lasted less than 10 seconds. When the dust settled, Jake was on the floor struggling to breathe. Bradley was whimpering while cradling his twisted wrist, and Gavin was leaning against the lockers with his face pale and his hand pressed to his ribs. They stared at her with expressions of shock and dawning fear, as if a house cat had suddenly revealed itself to be a tiger. Lily stood over them, her stance balanced and ready, her breathing controlled despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Her baggy hoodie had been torn in the struggle, revealing glimpses of the athletic build she'd kept hidden for so long, but more than that, her entire demeanor had changed. The quiet, submissive girl was gone, replaced by someone who radiated controlled violence and absolute confidence. "My name," she said in a voice that cut through the silence like a blade, "is Lily Zhang, not China girl, not freak, not mouse. And if any of you ever touch me again, what just happened will seem like a gentle suggestion compared to what comes next." Jake tried to stand and fell back down, still fighting to get air into his lungs. Bradley looked like he might cry. But it was Gavin's expression that revealed the true impact of what had just occurred. The casual arrogance was gone, replaced by something she'd never seen in his eyes before, genuine fear. "You're crazy," he wheezed, still clutching his ribs. "You're absolutely psycho." "No," Lily replied calmly, "I'm trained. There's a difference, and now you know it too." She stepped around their crumpled forms and walked toward the exit, her movements fluid and controlled. Behind her, she could hear them slowly picking themselves up, their whispered conversations full of pain and confusion and the dawning realization that they had fundamentally misjudged their target. As she pushed through the school's front doors into the gray afternoon air, Lily felt a complex mix of emotions washing over her. Relief that the constant harassment was finally over. Satisfaction at seeing her tormentors brought low. But also guilt at the violence. Guilt at the fear in their eyes. Guilt at how good it had felt to finally stop hiding who she really was. Her mother was waiting in the pickup circle, reading a book while the engine idled. When Lily slid into the passenger seat, her mother looked up with a smile that faded when she saw her daughter's torn hoodie and intense expression. "Rough day?" she asked carefully. Lily looked out the window at the school building, thinking about the 3 boys probably still picking themselves up off the hallway floor. Tomorrow, everything would be different. The story would spread, rumors would fly, and she would no longer be the invisible girl she'd tried so hard to remain. "You could say that," she replied quietly, "but I think it's going to get better now." As they drove home, Lily wondered if her father would be proud of her for finally standing up for herself, or disappointed that she'd resorted to violence. Then she thought about the look in Jake's eyes when he'd grabbed her hoodie, the casual cruelty in Gavin's voice, the complete lack of respect for her as a human being. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. No, she decided. She'd tried peaceful solutions. She'd endured weeks of harassment and humiliation. But when they'd crossed the line from emotional bullying to physical assault, when they'd tried to strip away her dignity along with her clothes, they'd made the choice for her. She'd simply reminded them that actions have consequences. By Monday morning, the story had spread through Riverside High like wildfire, growing and mutating with each retelling until it bore only a passing resemblance to what had actually happened. Some versions had Lily throwing Gavin through a window. Others claimed she'd used martial arts weapons hidden in her backpack. One particularly creative account suggested she'd rendered all 3 boys unconscious with pressure point techniques learned from ancient ninja scrolls. The truth was dramatic enough, but high school rumor mills had never been concerned with accuracy. Lily walked through the front doors to find herself the center of attention she'd spent her entire academic career trying to avoid. Conversations stopped as she passed. Students who had never noticed her before now stared openly, their expressions ranging from admiration to fear to simple curiosity. She could hear fragments of whispered conversations following in her wake. Heard she broke Bradley's wrist. My cousin said she's some kind of black belt. Gavin's still walking funny. Never saw it coming. The most surreal part was the way other students moved around her. Some stepped aside with obvious deference, as if she were radioactive. Others tried to catch her eye, offering tentative smiles or nods of approval. A few seemed to be working up the courage to approach her directly, but hadn't quite managed it yet. Her first period English class was a study in awkward tension. Students who had previously ignored her now snuck glances when they thought she wasn't looking. Even Mrs. Patterson, normally unflappable, seemed uncertain how to interact with her. When Lily answered a question about symbolism in To Kill a Mockingbird, the room fell silent in a way that suggested they were all remembering that she was no longer just another quiet student. But it was at lunch that the real test came. Lily had just settled at her usual table in the corner, a spot she'd chosen specifically because it was far from the popular crowd's territory, when she became aware of someone approaching. She looked up to see Gavin Harris standing awkwardly beside her table, his hands shoved deep in his pockets, and his usual confident swagger nowhere to be seen. The cafeteria noise level dropped noticeably as other students noticed the confrontation developing. Conversations became quieter, more furtive, as everyone strained to see what would happen between the former queen bee and the girl who had dethroned him. "Can I sit?" Gavin asked, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. Lily studied him carefully. He looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and a careful way of moving that suggested his ribs were still bothering him. More than that, though, he looked smaller somehow, not physically, but in the way he carried himself. The easy arrogance that had made him so intimidating was gone, replaced by something that might have been humility. "It's a free country," she said finally, gesturing to the empty chairs across from her. He sat down slowly, wincing slightly, and for a long moment they just looked at each other across the institutional plastic table. Around them, the cafeteria had fallen almost completely silent, with students leaning forward to catch whatever conversation was about to unfold. "I wanted to apologize," Gavin said finally. "What we did on Friday, that was wrong. All of it, but especially." He trailed off, apparently unable to find words for how wrong it had been. Lily waited. She wasn't going to make this easy for him. "I've been thinking about it all weekend," he continued. "About why I did it, why I thought it was okay to treat you like that. And I keep coming back to the same thing I was angry at. You for not being afraid of me." "I was afraid of you," Lily said quietly. "Every day, I just didn't let it control me." Gavin nodded slowly. "I know that now. And I know that what happened on Friday was my fault. We pushed you too far, and you defended yourself. I can't be mad about that, even if—" He touched his ribs gingerly. "Even if it hurt. You could have seriously injured me," Lily pointed out. "What you were trying to do, what Jake was doing with my clothes, that wasn't just bullying. That was assault." The word hung in the air between them like a physical presence. Gavin's face flushed, and he looked down at his hands. "I know," he said, "and I'm sorry. I'm sorrier than I know how to say." Lily studied his face, looking for signs of deception or manipulation. But what she saw was genuine remorse, mixed with a kind of confusion that suggested he was still processing how dramatically the power dynamic between them had shifted. "Apology accepted," she said finally. "But things are different now. You understand that, right?" Gavin nodded. "I understand that you're not someone to mess with." "Trust me, that message came through loud and clear." "It's not just about me being able to fight," Lily said. "It's about respect. About treating people like human beings instead of entertainment." "I get it," Gavin said. "And I'll make sure Bradley and Jake get it too." As if summoned by his name, Bradley appeared beside their table, his right wrist wrapped in an elastic bandage. He looked nervous, almost sick as he approached. "Lily," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I wanted to say I'm sorry too. What we did was horrible, and I know saying sorry doesn't make it okay, but I needed you to know that I feel terrible about it." Unlike Gavin, Bradley looked like he might cry. His usual swagger was completely gone, replaced by the kind of genuine shame that couldn't be faked. Lily found herself feeling almost sorry for him. He was clearly a follower who had gotten caught up in something that spiraled beyond his control. "Are you apologizing because you're actually sorry, or because you're scared of what I might do next?" she asked. Bradley's face crumpled slightly. "Both," he admitted. "I'm scared of you, yeah. But I'm also scared of who I was becoming. I never thought of myself as someone who would try to." He couldn't finish the sentence. "Thank you for being honest," Lily said. "And Bradley? Don't ever let someone else talk you into doing something you know is wrong. You have your own brain, use it." He nodded rapidly and hurried away, clearly eager to escape the conversation. Jake, notably, was nowhere to be seen. As Gavin stood to leave, he paused and looked down at her. "Can I ask you something? Where did you learn to fight like that?" "My father taught me," Lily said simply. "He's military. He wanted to make sure I could protect myself." "Well," Gavin said with a weak smile, "mission accomplished." After he left, Lily sat alone at her table, picking at her sandwich and processing what had just happened. Around her, the cafeteria slowly returned to its normal noise level, though she could still feel curious glances from every direction. The apologies felt genuine, but she knew they were only part of the equation. Gavin and Bradley were sorry because they'd discovered she wasn't the easy target they'd thought she was. The real test would be whether that translated into actual change in how they treated other people, or if they'd simply move on to victims who couldn't fight back. As she gathered her things to leave, Lily noticed a girl with shoulder-length brown hair approaching her table. Tessa Williams looked nervous but determined as she slid into the seat Gavin had vacated. "That was incredible," Tessa said without preamble. I'm sorry it had to happen, but watching Gavin Harris actually apologize to someone." She shook her head in amazement. "I never thought I'd see the day." "He seemed sincere," Lily said carefully. "Maybe," Tessa agreed. "But even if he wasn't, word is going to spread about what you did. Other kids who've been dealing with bullies are going to know that fighting back is possible." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. "I don't want to be anyone's inspiration for violence." "Not violence," Tessa said quickly. "Standing up for yourself, there's a difference." As they walked out of the cafeteria together, Lily reflected on how quickly everything had changed. 3 days ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was the center of attention, feared by some and admired by others. She'd achieved the safety she'd been seeking, but at the cost of the anonymity she'd treasured. The question now was what to do with this new reputation. Because whether she wanted it or not, Lily Zhang was no longer just another student at Riverside High School. She was the girl who had brought down the untouchable Gavin Harris. And in a place like high school, that kind of reputation came with its own set of challenges and responsibilities. The transformation in how other students treated Lily became even more apparent over the following days. What surprised her most wasn't the fear or the admiration. She'd expected those reactions. It was the gratitude. It started with small gestures. A freshman girl named Emma, who Lily had seen Gavin's crew target in the past, caught up with her after third period and quietly said, "Thank you," before hurrying away with tears in her eyes. A sophomore boy she didn't recognize nodded respectfully as they passed in the hallway. Even some of the popular kids who had previously acted like she didn't exist now acknowledged her presence with careful politeness. But it was Wednesday afternoon when the real impact of her actions became clear. Lily was heading to her locker after school when she heard raised voices coming from around the corner. The tone was familiar, the kind of casual cruelty she'd endured for weeks before finally fighting back. But this time, she wasn't the target. "Come on, freak show," came a voice she recognized as one of Gavin's former hangers-on, a junior named Marcus who apparently hadn't gotten the memo about the new order of things. "Hand over your lunch money. Consider it a stupid tax." Lily rounded the corner to find Marcus and another boy cornering a girl with curly red hair and paint-stained fingers who looked like she belonged to the art crowd. The girl was pressed back against the lockers, clutching a portfolio to her chest like a shield, her face pale with fear. "I don't have any money," the girl Lily thought her name was Kara said in a voice that shook despite her obvious attempt to sound defiant. "And even if I did, I wouldn't give it to you." "Wrong answer," Marcus sneered, reaching for the portfolio. "Maybe we should see what kind of weird stuff you draw in there, but it's even weirder than you are." That's when Lily decided she'd seen enough. "Marcus," she said, her voice cutting through the hallway like a knife. All three students turned to look at her, and she was gratified to see Marcus's face go pale. "I thought you would have learned something from what happened to your buddies last week." Marcus straightened up, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. "This has nothing to do with you, Zhang. Mind your own business." "Funny thing about bullying," Lily said, walking closer with the fluid, balanced movement she'd learned in the dojo. "It becomes everyone's business eventually, especially when the bullies are too stupid to learn from other people's mistakes." The other boy with Marcus Lily didn't know his name, took a step backward. He'd apparently heard enough details about Friday's confrontation to want no part of whatever was about to happen. "You can't fight everyone," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You can't be everywhere." "You're right," Lily agreed. "I can't be everywhere. But word travels fast in a school this size. How long do you think it'll take for everyone to know that Marcus Crawford got taken down by a girl half his size? How long before your own friends start looking at you the way you're looking at me right now?" She didn't raise her voice, didn't make any threatening gestures. She didn't need to. The quiet confidence in her tone, combined with the reputation she'd gained, was enough to make Marcus's bravado crumble. "This isn't over," he muttered, but he was already backing away. "Yes, it is," Lily said simply. "My father taught me," Lily said simply. "He's military. He wanted to make sure I could protect myself." "Well," Gavin said with a weak smile, "mission accomplished." After he left, Lily sat alone at her table, picking at her sandwich and processing what had just happened. Around her, the cafeteria slowly returned to its normal noise level, though she could still feel curious glances from every direction. The apologies felt genuine, but she knew they were only part of the equation. Gavin and Bradley were sorry because they'd discovered she wasn't the easy target they'd thought she was. The real test would be whether that translated into actual Change in how they treated other people, or if they'd simply move on to victims who couldn't fight back. As she gathered her things to leave, Lily noticed a girl with shoulder-length brown hair approaching her table. Tessa Williams looked nervous but determined as she slid into the seat Gavin had vacated. "That was incredible," Tessa said without preamble. I'm sorry it had to happen, but watching Gavin Harris actually apologize to someone." She shook her head in amazement. "I never thought I'd see the day." "He seemed sincere," Lily said carefully. "Maybe," Tessa agreed. "But even if he wasn't, word is going to spread about what you did. Other kids who've been dealing with bullies are going to know that fighting back is possible." Lily felt a chill run down her spine. "I don't want to be anyone's inspiration for violence." "Not violence," Tessa said quickly. "Standing up for yourself, there's a difference." As they walked out of the cafeteria together, Lily reflected on how quickly everything had changed. 3 days ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was the center of attention, feared by some and admired by others. She'd achieved the safety she'd been seeking, but at the cost of the anonymity she'd treasured. The question now was what to do with this new reputation. Because whether she wanted it or not, Lily Zhang was no longer just another student at Riverside High School. She was the girl who had brought down the untouchable Gavin Harris. And in a place like high school, that kind of reputation came with its own set of challenges and responsibilities. The transformation in how other students treated Lily became even more apparent over the following days. What surprised her most wasn't the fear or the admiration. She'd expected those reactions. It was the gratitude. It started with small gestures. A freshman girl named Emma, who Lily had seen Gavin's crew target in the past, caught up with her after third period and quietly said, "Thank you," before hurrying away with tears in her eyes. A sophomore boy she didn't recognize nodded respectfully as they passed in the hallway. Even some of the popular kids who had previously acted like she didn't exist now acknowledged her presence with careful politeness. But it was Wednesday afternoon when the real impact of her actions became clear. Lily was heading to her locker after school when she heard raised voices coming from around the corner. The tone was familiar, the kind of casual cruelty she'd endured for weeks before finally fighting back. But this time, she wasn't the target. "Come on, freak show," came a voice she recognized as one of Gavin's former hangers-on, a junior named Marcus who apparently hadn't gotten the memo about the new order of things. "Hand over your lunch money. Consider it a stupid tax." Lily rounded the corner to find Marcus and another boy cornering a girl with curly red hair and paint-stained fingers who looked like she belonged to the art crowd. The girl was pressed back against the lockers, clutching a portfolio to her chest like a shield, her face pale with fear. "I don't have any money," the girl Lily thought her name was Kara said in a voice that shook despite her obvious attempt to sound defiant. "And even if I did, I wouldn't give it to you." "Wrong answer," Marcus sneered, reaching for the portfolio. "Maybe we should see what kind of weird stuff you draw in there, but it's even weirder than you are." That's when Lily decided she'd seen enough. "Marcus," she said, her voice cutting through the hallway like a knife. All 3 students turned to look at her, and she was gratified to see Marcus's face go pale. "I thought you would have learned something from what happened to your buddies last week." Marcus straightened up, trying to project confidence he clearly didn't feel. "This has nothing to do with you, Zhang. Mind your own business." "Funny thing about bullying," Lily said, walking closer with the fluid, balanced movement she'd learned in the dojo. "It becomes everyone's business eventually, especially when the bullies are too stupid to learn from other people's mistakes." The other boy with Marcus Lily didn't know his name, took a step backward. He'd apparently heard enough details about Friday's confrontation to want no part of whatever was about to happen. "You can't fight everyone," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You can't be everywhere." "You're right," Lily agreed. "I can't be everywhere. But word travels fast in a school this size." How long do you think it'll take for everyone to know that Marcus Crawford got taken down by a girl half his size? How long before your own friends start looking at you the way you're looking at me right now?" She didn't raise her voice, didn't make any threatening gestures. She didn't need to. The quiet confidence in her tone, combined with the reputation she'd gained, was enough to make Marcus's bravado crumble. "This isn't over," he muttered, but he was already backing away. "Yes, it is," Lily said simply. "Walk away, Marcus, before you embarrass yourself worse than you already have." He left, taking his friend with him and leaving Lily alone with the red-haired girl, who was staring at her with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "Thank you, Kara," sighed, her voice still shaky. I was sure they were going to." She trailed off, apparently unable to finish the sentence. "They were going to what?" Lily asked gently. "Take my portfolio. Maybe destroy it." Kara hugged the leather case tighter. "I know it sounds stupid, but I've been working on these pieces for months. They're for my college applications." "It doesn't sound stupid at all," Lily said. "What's your name?" "Kara Mills. I know who you are. Everyone knows who you are after what you did to Gavin and his crew." Lily felt a familiar twist of discomfort at being the center of attention, but she pushed it aside. "Have they been bothering you for long?" Kara nodded. "Since freshman year, really. But it got worse after Gavin decided I was an easy target. Marcus and some of the others started copying his behavior, trying to prove they were just as tough." She looked down at her paint-stained fingers. "I'm not exactly intimidating, so I was perfect prey." "You don't have to be intimidating to deserve respect," Lily said firmly. "And you don't have to put up with being treated like that." As they walked toward the parking lot together, Kara opened up about her experiences with the school's social hierarchy. Her story was depressingly familiar, a quiet, artistic kid who'd been marked as different and subsequently targeted by bullies looking for easy victims. But what struck Lily was how Kara had maintained her sense of humor and her passion for art despite years of harassment. "The weird thing is," Kara said as they reached the pickup area, "I always thought if someone like you had been around, someone who could actually fight back, things would be different. And now you are here, and they are different." Marcus just walked away. He didn't even try to argue. "Maybe," Lily said. "But real change has to come from more than just fear. People like Marcus need to understand that what they're doing is wrong, not just that there might be consequences." Speaking of consequences, came a familiar voice behind them. They turned to see Tessa Williams approaching, her backpack slung over one shoulder and a small smile on her face. "I saw what happened with Marcus. The whole thing was over before I could even decide whether to go get a teacher. Teachers don't really help with this kind of thing anyway," Kara said with a bitter laugh. "By the time you find one and explain what's happening, the bullies are long gone and you just look like a tattletale. Or the teachers give everyone involved detention and call it even," Tessa added. "Like being bullied and bullying someone are equivalent crimes." The three girls stood together in comfortable silence for a moment, and Lily realized something significant was happening. For the first time since arriving at Riverside High, she wasn't alone. These weren't just random classmates being polite. These were potential friends, people who understood what she'd been through because they'd experienced it themselves. "You know," Tessa said thoughtfully, "there are probably other kids in school who've been dealing with the same kind of harassment. Kids who saw what happened with Gavin and realized for the first time that bullies aren't invincible." "What are you suggesting?" Lily asked. "I'm not suggesting anything dramatic," Tessa said quickly. "I'm not talking about forming some kind of vigilante group or anything, but maybe there's a way to make sure what happened to you doesn't happen to other people. A way to support each other." Karen nodded enthusiastically. "Like a mutual protection society. Not fighting, necessarily, but making sure no one has to face bullies alone." Lily considered this. The idea appealed to her, but it also worried her. She'd never wanted to be a leader, never wanted to be responsible for other people's safety. But looking at Tessa and Kara, seeing the hope in their eyes, she realized that choice had already been taken away from her. Whether she liked it or not, her confrontation with Gavin had made her a symbol. Other students who had been suffering in silence were looking to her as proof that fighting back was possible. She could either embrace that responsibility or let them down. "Okay," she said finally, "but we do this smart. No violence unless there's absolutely no other choice. The goal is to prevent bullying, not to create more conflict." "Agreed," Tessa said immediately. "Definitely," Kara added. "I mean, I couldn't fight my way out of a paper bag anyway, but I'm good at other things. Art therapy, listening to people, that kind of stuff." As they exchanged phone numbers and made plans to meet the next day, Lily felt something she hadn't experienced since arriving in this small town, a sense of belonging. Not the fake belonging that came from fear or reputation, but the real thing, acceptance based on shared experience and mutual respect. Her mother's car pulled up to the curb, and as Lily said goodbye to her new friends, she reflected on how much her life had changed in just 1 week. She'd gone from invisible to notorious, from isolated to surrounded by allies, from victim to protector. It was a heavy burden, but for the first time, she felt like she might not have to carry it alone. As they drove home, her mother glanced at her with curiosity. "You look different today, happier." "I made some friends," Lily said. Simply, "That's wonderful, honey. I was starting to worry that you were isolating yourself too much." Lily smiled, thinking about Tessa's quiet strength and Kara's resilient humor. "Yeah, Mom, I think everything's going to be okay." And for the first time since arriving at Riverside High School, she actually believed it. 3 weeks after the confrontation that had redefined the social landscape of Riverside High School, Lily was surprised to find Gavin Harris waiting by her locker after final period. Unlike their previous encounters, there was nothing threatening about his presence. He stood with his hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched, looking more like a nervous teenager than the intimidating bully who had once ruled the hallways. The students flowing past them gave them both a wide berth, conversations dropping to whispers as they recognized the significance of this meeting. Everyone knew the story by now, how the quiet new girl had taken down the school's most feared bully in a matter of seconds. But seeing them together again brought back the electricity of that moment, the shock of watching an established hierarchy crumble in real time. "Can we talk?" Gavin asked, his voice lacking the commanding tone that had once made teachers and students alike defer to his demands. "Privately?" Lily studied his face, looking for signs of deception or hidden anger. What she saw instead was exhaustion and something that might have been genuine remorse. The past few weeks had clearly been difficult for him, his usual crew of followers had dispersed, his social status had plummeted, and the easy confidence that had defined his identity was nowhere to be found. "The library?" she suggested. "There's usually nobody in the back section after school." They walked in silence through the nearly empty hallways, their footsteps echoing off the polished floors. Lily remained alert, her training never fully disengaged, but Gavin's body language suggested defeat rather than aggression. Whatever he wanted to discuss, it wasn't another confrontation. The library was indeed deserted, except for Mrs. Chun, the librarian, who was packing up her things for the day. She nodded to them briefly before disappearing into her office, leaving them alone among the stacks of books that stretched toward the high windows. Gavin chose a table in the corner, away from the main aisles, and sat down heavily. For a long moment, he just stared at his hands, apparently struggling to find the right words. "I've been thinking about what happened," he said finally. "Not just the fight, though. I think about that too, trust me. But everything leading up to it. All the things I did to you, all the things I said." Lily waited, letting him work through whatever he needed to say without interruption. I keep trying to figure out why I did it, Gavin continued. Why I targeted you specifically. Why I thought it was okay to treat another human being like that. And the truth is, I think I was scared of you. Scared of me? Lily couldn't hide her surprise. Before the fight, I never did anything remotely threatening. I went out of my way to avoid you. That's exactly why, Gavin said, looking up at her for the first time since they'd sat down. You didn't react the way people were supposed to react. When I made fun of someone, they usually got angry or upset or tried to fight back in ways that just made them look weaker. But you just took it, like it didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. He paused, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Do you know what it's like to have your entire identity built around other people being afraid of you? And then this quiet girl shows up and acts like you're completely irrelevant. It made me feel invisible, powerless, so I kept escalating. Trying to get some kind of reaction. Trying to prove that I still mattered. Lily found herself feeling an unexpected stab of sympathy. She'd spent so much time thinking about her own experience as the victim that she'd never considered the psychology driving her tormentor's behavior. That doesn't excuse what you did, she said carefully. Feeling insecure doesn't give you the right to hurt other people. I know, Gavin said immediately. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm trying to understand so I can make sure it never happens again. What do you mean? Gavin was quiet for a moment, seeming to gather his courage for what came next. I've been talking to the school counselor, Dr. Martinez. She helped me realize that I've been bullying people since middle school because it was the only way I knew how to feel important. My dad, he's not around much, and when he is, he's usually drunk and angry. My mom works 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. At home, I'm nobody special. I'm just another kid who's disappointing the people who are supposed to love him. The vulnerability in his voice was startling. This was a side of Gavin Harris that no one at school had ever seen, not the swaggering quarterback, not the confident bully, but a lonely teenager struggling with his own pain. But that's not your problem, he continued quickly. I shouldn't have made it your problem or anyone else's problem. What I did to you, what I've done to other kids over the years, it was wrong. Completely, inexcusably wrong. Lily felt something shift inside her chest, not forgiveness exactly, but a recognition of shared humanity. They were both just kids trying to navigate a world that often felt hostile and unpredictable, dealing with challenges that seemed bigger than they were equipped to handle. I appreciate you telling me this, she said. But what happens now? Do you expect everything to just go back to normal? No, Gavin said firmly. I know I can't undo the damage I've done. To you, to other kids I've hurt over the years. But I want to try to make things right, even if it's just in small ways. What does that look like? I've been thinking about that too. Dr. Martinez suggested I could use my former status, I guess, to help other kids instead of hurting them. Like, if I see someone getting picked on, I could step in. Not as the guy who used to be the top bully, but as someone who understands how destructive that behavior is. Lily considered this. The idea of Gavin Harris as a protector rather than a predator was difficult to imagine, but she'd learned that people were capable of surprising changes when they were motivated by genuine remorse. Actions matter more than words, she said. Finally, if you really want to make amends, prove it through how you treat people going forward. I will, Gavin promised. And Lily, I want you to know that what you did that day in the hallway, it probably saved me from becoming someone I would have hated. You showed me what I really was, and it forced me to look at myself honestly for the first time in years. They sat in silence for a few minutes, both processing the weight of the conversation. Outside the windows, the late afternoon sun was casting long shadows across the school grounds, and Lily could hear the distant sounds of sports practices beginning on the athletic fields. "There's something else," Gavin said eventually. "Jake. He's been saying some pretty ugly things about you since everything happened. Talking about getting revenge, making threats. I wanted you to know so you could be careful around him." Lily felt a familiar chill run down her spine. Of the 3 boys who had cornered her that day, Jake had been the most vicious, the most cruel in his comments. Unlike Gavin and Bradley, who had shown genuine remorse, Jake seemed to view what had happened as a humiliation that needed to be answered. "What kind of threats?" she asked. "Nothing specific enough that you could take to the administration," Gavin said. "But he's angry, and he's been trying to recruit other guys who feel like you made them all look weak. Most people are smart enough not to mess with you now, but Jake, he's not the smartest person in our class." Lily nodded, filing the information away. She'd been aware that not everyone would accept the new dynamic at school, but she'd hoped the message had been clear enough to deter further confrontations. "Thank you for warning me," she said. "Why are you telling me this? You don't owe me any favors. Maybe I'm hoping that if I start doing the right thing now, I can eventually become the kind of person who doesn't need to ask for forgiveness." As they prepared to leave the library, Gavin paused one more time. "Can I ask you something? That day when you fought us, how long have you been training?" "Since I was 8, Lily said simply. "My father wanted me to be able to protect myself." 8 years, Gavin repeated, shaking his head. "We never had a chance, did we?" "No," Lily said honestly. "You didn't, but that was never the point. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I just wanted to be left alone." "I know," Gavin said. "And I'm sorry it took me so long to understand that." As they walked out of the library together, Lily reflected on how strange life could be. 3 weeks ago, Gavin Harris had been her worst nightmare, the embodiment of everything she'd tried to avoid about high school social politics. Now he was someone she could see herself eventually considering a friend. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time, but someday. People could change, she realized. Sometimes it took a dramatic wake-up call. Sometimes it required facing consequences they'd never experienced before. But genuine change was possible. The question was whether Jake would prove capable of the same growth, or if her peaceful new existence at Riverside High was about to be challenged once again. The change in Riverside High School's social atmosphere became impossible to ignore as October melted into November. What had started as whispered conversations about Lily's confrontation with Gavin had evolved into something larger, a shift in how students thought about bullying, power, and standing up for themselves. It began with small incidents that might have gone unnoticed before, but now carried extra weight. Sarah Chun, a quiet sophomore who had been targeted by a group of mean girls for months, suddenly found her voice when they cornered her in the bathroom. Instead of enduring their taunts about her clothes and accent, she looked them straight in the eye and told them exactly what she thought of their behavior. When they threatened to make her life miserable, she simply said, "Go ahead and try. See how that works out for you." The mean girls backed down, perhaps remembering what had happened to the last group of students who had pushed a quiet target too far. Marcus Crawford, the junior who had tried to shake down Kara Mills for lunch money only to be confronted by Lily, found himself facing a very different kind of resistance when he attempted to intimidate a freshman named David Park. Instead of the isolated victim Marcus had expected, he discovered that David's friends were prepared to stand with him. More importantly, several upperclassmen students who had never shown any interest in protecting underclassmen before appeared seemingly out of nowhere to make it clear that this kind of behavior was no longer acceptable. Mrs. Ortega was the first teacher to comment on the change during a faculty meeting. "I don't know what's happened in the past month," she told her colleagues, "but bullying incidents in my classes have dropped dramatically. More than that, students are actually intervening when they see other kids being picked on. It's like They finally realized they don't have to be bystanders. Mr. Rodriguez, who taught pay and had seen more than his share of locker room harassment over the years, nodded in agreement. Same thing in my classes. Kids who used to be targets are carrying themselves differently, more confident. And the kids who used to do the targeting, most of them have backed off completely. Most of them? Asked Miss Foster, the guidance counselor. There are always a few who take longer to get the message, Mr. Rodriguez said carefully. But peer pressure is working in our favor for once. Nobody wants to be seen as the kind of person who picks on people who can't fight back. What the teachers didn't fully understand was the network that had grown around Lily, Tessa, and Kara. It wasn't an official organization with meetings or membership cards, but rather an informal support system that had spread through the school's social media and text messaging networks. Students who had been bullied found each other, shared their experiences, and most importantly, committed to having each other's backs. Lily found herself at the center of this movement without having asked for the role. Students she'd never spoken to would nod respectfully when they passed her in the hallways. Underclassmen who were being harassed would discreetly approach her for advice. Even some teachers began treating her differently, not with fear, but with a kind of respect usually reserved for student council presidents and star athletes. The attention was overwhelming at times, but it was also deeply satisfying in ways she hadn't expected. You realize what you've done, don't you? Tessa said one afternoon as they sat in their usual spot in the cafeteria, now joined regularly by Kara and a rotating group of other students who had found safety in their informal alliance. I defended myself, Lily said simply, taking a bite of her sandwich. You changed the entire culture of the school, Kara corrected. Last week, I saw Emma Rodriguez tell Tyler Banks to shut up when he was making fun of some kid's stutter. Emma, the girl who used to hide in the art room during lunch to avoid exactly that kind of situation. And yesterday, added David Park, the freshman who had benefited from the new protective atmosphere, I watched 3 different groups of upperclassmen tell Marcus Crawford to back off when he was hassling different people. He's basically become a social pariah. Lily felt a complex mix of pride and concern. She was glad that other students were finding their voices and standing up for themselves, but she worried about the sustainability of change that seemed to be built around her reputation rather than genuine shifts in empathy and understanding. The real test, she said thoughtfully, will be what happens when I graduate. Will people keep standing up for each other, or will things go back to the way they were? I don't think they can go back, Tessa said. Too many people have seen that bullies aren't invincible. That changes everything. As if to underscore her point, a freshman girl Lily didn't recognize approached their table hesitantly. Excuse me, the girl said, her voice barely above a whisper. Are you Lily Zhang? I am, Lily confirmed gently. What's your name? Madison. Madison Foster. I wanted to thank you. For what? Madison glanced around nervously before continuing. My older brother goes here too. He's a junior and he used to push me around at home and at school. Nothing too serious, just typical sibling stuff, but it was getting worse. He'd embarrass me in front of his friends, make fun of me in the hallways, that kind of thing. She paused, gathering courage to continue. But after what happened with you and Gavin Harris, he stopped. Just completely stopped. I think he realized that picking on people smaller than him wasn't as safe as he thought it was. He actually apologized to me last week, Madison smiled shyly. So thank you for showing everyone that actions have consequences. After Madison left, the table was quiet for a moment. See, Kara said finally, it's not just about school anymore. People are taking this attitude home with them, into their families and friend groups. You've started something that's bigger than just stopping the few bullies. But even as her friends celebrated the positive changes, Lily couldn't shake the feeling that not everyone had gotten the message. Gavin had genuinely apologized and seemed committed to changing his behavior. Bradley had expressed remorse and was clearly working to rebuild his reputation through kindness rather than intimidation. But Jake Winters remained conspicuously absent from any conversations about growth or redemption. Her concerns proved justified the following week when Tessa approached her with a worried expression during their shared study hall. "I need to tell you something," Tessa said, glancing around to make sure they couldn't be overheard. "I've been hearing rumors about Jake. Apparently, he's been talking to kids from other schools, trying to find people who might want to settle the score with you." Lily felt her stomach tighten. "What kind of people?" "I don't know exactly. But someone said he's been reaching out to guys from the regional football league, telling them that some girl at Riverside made him and his friends look weak, trying to frame it as a challenge to their masculinity or something. Has he made any specific threats?" "Nothing direct. But he's apparently been saying that you got lucky, that you caught them off guard, and that a real fight would end differently." Lily nodded grimly. She'd been hoping that the message she'd sent would be clear enough to prevent further confrontations, but she'd also known that some people were too proud or too stupid to learn from other people's mistakes. "I'll be careful," she promised Tessa. "But I'm not going to live in fear either. If Jake wants to escalate this, that's his choice. But he should remember how the last escalation worked out for him." As study hall ended and they gathered their books, Lily reflected on the double-edged nature of her new reputation. Yes, she had helped create a safer environment for vulnerable students at Riverside High. Yes, she had proven that bullies weren't invincible and that standing up for yourself was possible. But she had also painted a target on her back, one that might attract challenges from people who hadn't witnessed her capabilities firsthand. People who saw her story as a threat to their own sense of dominance, and who might be willing to go further than high school bullies to prove their point. The ripple effects of that October afternoon in the hallway were still spreading, touching lives and changing dynamics in ways she could never have predicted. Most of those changes were positive, empowering students who had felt powerless and creating a culture where kindness was valued over cruelty. But ripples moved in all directions, and some of them were heading toward shores that might not welcome the message she had sent. The call came on a Sunday evening in late November, just as Lily was finishing her homework at the kitchen table. Her mother answered the phone in the living room, and Lily could hear the change in her voice immediately, the shift from casual weekend relaxation to the focused attention that meant military business. "It's your father," her mother said, appearing in the doorway with the cordless phone. "He's got a few minutes between meetings." Lily's heart jumped. Master Sergeant David Zhang had been deployed for 6 months, and communication opportunities were rare and precious. She took the phone and walked out to the back porch, where she could speak privately under the November stars. "Hey, Dad. There's my warrior princess," came her father's familiar voice, slightly distorted by the international connection but unmistakably warm. "How's my favorite martial artist?" The endearment made her smile, but it also brought up all the complex emotions she'd been wrestling with since the confrontation with Gavin and his friends. "Dad, I need to tell you something. Something happened at school." She told him everything about the bullying, about trying to handle it peacefully, about the final confrontation and its aftermath. Her father listened without interruption, occasionally making small sounds that indicated he was processing what she was telling him. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Are you disappointed in me?" Lily asked finally. "For using violence? For not finding another way?" "Disappointed?" Her father's voice carried genuine surprise. "Lily, I'm proud of you. You tried every peaceful option available to you. You showed restraint for weeks in the face of escalating harassment. You only used force when you were physically threatened and had no other choice. But I hurt them badly. You defended yourself against people who were trying to assault you, her father corrected firmly. There's a difference between violence and self-defense, and you know that difference better than most people twice your age. Lily felt some of the weight she'd been carrying begin to lift. I keep thinking about what you taught me about the responsibility that comes with our training, about using our skills to protect people who can't protect themselves. And what have you been doing since then? Her father asked. From what you've told me, you've created an environment where other students feel safer, where bullying has decreased, where kids are standing up for each other. That sounds exactly like using your skills to protect people who can't protect themselves. But I didn't plan any of that. I just wanted them to leave me alone. The best leaders rarely set out to be leaders, her father said. They just do what's right in their immediate situation, and others recognize that quality and choose to follow their example. They talked for another 10 minutes before his time ran out, but those words stayed with Lily long after she'd hung up the phone. She walked back inside to find her mother waiting in the kitchen with 2 cups of hot chocolate. Good talk? Her mother asked. Yeah, Lily said, settling into the chair across from her. Mom, can I ask you something? Do you think I'm different than I was when we moved here? Her mother studied her thoughtfully. You're more confident, she said finally. More comfortable with yourself. When we first arrived, you seemed to be trying to disappear, to take up as little space as possible. Now you walk like you belong wherever you are. Is that good or bad? It's good, honey. It's very good. I was worried about you for a while. They're worried that all the moving and changing schools had made you afraid to form connections or stand up for yourself. But you've found your footing here in a way that makes me think you're going to be just fine in college and beyond. The next morning at school, Lily found herself observing her environment with new eyes. She watched Emma Rodriguez confidently navigate the hallways where she used to skulk along the walls. She saw David Park laughing with friends instead of eating lunch alone in the library. She noticed how students naturally intervened when they witnessed potential conflicts, creating a web of mutual protection that hadn't existed 2 months earlier. During her AP history class, Mrs. Ortega announced a group project about social movements and their long-term impacts. I want you to think about how individual actions can create larger changes, Mrs. Ortega said, her eyes briefly meeting Lily's. How one person's decision to stand up for their principles can inspire others to examine their own behavior and choices. As Lily worked with her assigned group, which included Tessa, Kara, and surprisingly, Bradley Moore, she found herself thinking about the ripple effects that continued to spread from that October afternoon. Bradley had become one of the most vocal advocates for anti-bullying policies in student government. Gavin had started volunteering with a local youth mentorship program. Even some of the students who had never been directly involved in bullying had begun speaking up more when they witnessed unfairness or cruelty. You know what I think is interesting? Bradley said during their discussion. How quickly things changed once people realized that being a bully wasn't actually cool or powerful. Like once the mystique was broken, everyone could see how pathetic it really was. It wasn't mystique, Kara corrected. It was fear. People went along with bullying because they were afraid of becoming targets themselves. Once someone proved that bullies could be stopped, that fear went away. But the fear had to be replaced with something, Tessa added. And I think what replaced it was hope. Hope that things could be different. That school didn't have to be a place where some people got to torment others just because they could. As their discussion continued, Lily realized that her father had been right. She hadn't set out to become a leader or to change the culture of Riverside High School. She'd simply reached a point where she couldn't tolerate being victimized anymore, and she'd used the skills he'd taught her to defend herself. But the aftermath had taught her something important about responsibility and community. Having the ability to protect yourself came with an obligation to protect others when you could. Having the respect that came from demonstrated strength meant using that respect to advocate for kindness and fairness rather than dominance. After school, As she walked to her locker with Tessa and Kara, Lily reflected on how much her life had changed since arriving in this small town. She'd gone from being an isolated new student, trying to stay invisible, to being someone other students looked to for leadership and protection. The transformation hadn't been easy or entirely welcome, but it had been necessary. And as she looked around at the hallways where students now felt safer, where kindness was valued over cruelty, where standing up for others had become normal rather than exceptional, she realized that some responsibilities were worth accepting even when you didn't ask for them. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Tessa asked as they reached Lily's locker. "Just thinking about how different everything is now," Lily said. "6 months ago, I would have said that the best outcome for senior year would be graduating without anyone noticing I existed. And now?" Kara prompted. "Now I think the best outcome is graduating knowing that I helped make this place a little bit better for the people who come after us." As they parted ways for the day, Lily felt a deep sense of satisfaction that had nothing to do with her martial arts achievements or her ability to defend herself. It came from the knowledge that she had used her strength not just to protect herself, but to create space for others to find their own strength. Her father would be proud, she thought, not just of the fighter he had trained, but of the person she had chosen to become. Spring arrived at Riverside High School like a promise fulfilled. The hallways that had once felt hostile and unpredictable now buzzed with the comfortable energy of a community that had learned to police itself through kindness rather than fear. As Lily walked through the familiar corridors on a warm April morning, she marveled at how completely the atmosphere had transformed since her arrival 7 months earlier. The changes were visible everywhere she looked. Students who had once hunched their shoulders and avoided eye contact now walked with confidence. Conversations flowed freely without the undercurrent of cruelty that had once poisoned social interactions. Even the teachers seemed more relaxed, no longer constantly scanning for signs of harassment or intimidation. Near the main staircase, the same spot where Gavin and his friends had once held court like predatory royalty, a diverse group of students had claimed the space. Lily recognized several faces. Emma Rodriguez, who now served as president of the newly formed Peer Support Club. David Park, whose quick wit and genuine kindness had made him popular across multiple social circles. And Madison Foster, the freshman who had thanked Lily months earlier and who now mentored other students struggling with family dynamics. "Morning, Lily," Emma called out as she passed, her voice carrying the easy confidence of someone who no longer feared being noticed. "Hey Emma, ready for the presentation today?" The presentation Emma referenced was part of the school's new anti-bullying initiative, student-led program that had grown organically from the support network Lily, Tessa, and Kara had helped establish. Today, they would be addressing incoming freshmen and their parents about creating positive school culture, with Emma serving as the primary speaker. "I think so," Emma replied, though Lily could see the nervous excitement in her eyes. "It's strange, you know. A year ago, I would have been terrified to speak in front of 5 people, let alone 50. "You'll do great," Lily assured her. "You've got something important to say, and you know how to say it." As Lily continued toward her locker, she reflected on how many similar conversations she'd had over the past few months. Students who had once been voiceless were finding their platforms, creating positive change through leadership rather than simply reacting to negative circumstances. At her locker, she found Tessa and Kara waiting with matching grins that immediately put her on alert. "What's going on?" Lily asked suspiciously. "You two look like you're planning something." "We have news," Tessa announced, practically vibrating with excitement. "Good news. Jake Winters got suspended," Kara added bluntly. "Indefinitely, pending a full investigation." Lily felt her stomach drop. After months of relative peace, she'd begun to hope that Jake had simply moved on, found other ways to channel his anger and resentment. What happened? Was someone hurt? No, Tessa said quickly. Nothing like that. Apparently, he's been running some kind of harassment campaign online, creating fake social media accounts to target students from other schools, trying to organize some kind of revenge scenario against you. The administration found out when parents from Millfield High complained about their kids being contacted by someone claiming to be from Riverside. He kept records of everything, Kara added with amazement. Screenshots, contact lists, detailed plans for what he called restoring the natural order. Mr. Peterson said it was like he'd created a whole manifesto about why bullying was actually good for society. Lily absorbed this information with mixed feelings. On one hand, she was relieved that Jake's anger had finally manifested in a way that brought adult intervention before anyone got hurt. On the other hand, she felt sad for him, sad that he'd been so unable to process his own humiliation that he'd spent months plotting elaborate revenge scenarios instead of simply moving forward with his life. Is he coming back next year? She asked. Unlikely, Tessa said. His parents are apparently looking at military schools or alternative programs. Dr. Martinez thinks he needs intensive counseling before he can be around other students safely. As they walked to first period, Lily found herself thinking about paths not taken and the different ways people responded to having their worldview challenged. Gavin had used his experience as motivation for genuine self-reflection and growth. Bradley had channeled his guilt into positive action and advocacy. But Jake had retreated into resentment fantasy, unable to accept that his behavior had consequences. You know what's weird? Kara said as they settled into their seats for a P literature. I actually feel sorry for him. Like, how miserable. Do you have to be to spend months of your life planning revenge against a classmate instead of just living your life? I feel sorry for him too, Lily admitted. But I'm also grateful that adults intervened before he could act on any of his plans. Some people need professional help to work through their issues, and there's no shame in that. The morning passed quickly, filled with the familiar rhythms of academic life. During lunch, Lily sat with her usual group: Tessa, Kara, Emma, David, and several others who had become part of their extended circle. The conversation flowed easily from homework complaints to weekend plans to speculation about college acceptance letters. I still can't believe we're graduating in 2 months, Tessa said, picking at her salad. Remember when October felt like it would never end? October was a lifetime ago, David agreed. Everything's different now. Not everything, Lily said thoughtfully. The basic dynamics are the same. People still form groups, still compete for social status, still deal with insecurities and pressures. But the way we handle those things has changed. Because people learned that there were consequences for being cruel, Emma added, and rewards for being kind. Also because you showed everyone that the people they thought were powerless actually weren't, Kara pointed out, looking directly at Lily. Once that illusion was broken, everything else followed. As the conversation continued around her, Lily found herself observing the broader cafeteria with the same analytical eye she'd once used to identify threats. But instead of mapping escape routes and cataloging potential aggressors, she was noting connections and community. At a table near the windows, she saw Gavin Harris eating lunch with members of the debate team, an unlikely social combination that would have been unthinkable 8 months earlier. He caught her eye and offered a small wave, which she returned with a genuine smile. Their relationship would probably never be close, but it was built on mutual respect and shared commitment to making their school environment better. Bradley Moore was at another table, engaged in animated conversation with students from the drama club about their upcoming spring production. His transformation from follower to leader had been remarkable to watch, and Lily knew that his experiences with both bullying and redemption would serve him well in whatever career he eventually chose. Earth to Lily, Tessa said, waving a hand in front of her face. Where'd you go? Just thinking about how things turned out, Lily replied. 7 months ago, I would have been eating lunch alone in the library, counting the days until graduation. Now you're surrounded by people who think you're awesome, Kara finished. And you've got college acceptance letters to 3 different schools with excellent martial arts programs. It was true. The University of Oregon, Portland State, and even a small private college in California had all offered her spots in their programs, recognizing not just her academic achievements, but her leadership experience and community involvement. The shy girl who had tried to remain invisible had somehow become someone that admissions committees found compelling. "Have you decided which one you're choosing?" Emma asked. "I think so," Lily said. University of Oregon has the best combination of academics and training facilities. Plus, it's close enough that I can come back and visit easily." "Visit?" David laughed. "You mean come back and make sure we're all still behaving ourselves." The joke was good-natured, but it touched on something real. Lily did worry about what would happen to the school culture they'd all worked to create once she and the other seniors graduated. Would the younger students maintain the standards they'd established, or would new power dynamics emerge to fill the vacuum? "You know," she said seriously, "the most important thing we've done isn't about me or my fighting skills. It's about proving that communities can choose to be better. That students can create the kind of environment they want to learn in, instead of just accepting whatever toxic dynamics happen to emerge." "Very philosophical for a Tuesday lunch period," Tessa teased, but her expression was thoughtful. "Though you're right. The real victory isn't that you beat up some bullies. It's that we all learned we didn't have to accept bullying as normal." As the lunch period ended and they gathered their things, Lily felt a deep sense of completion. Not the ending of a story, but the successful conclusion of a chapter that had redefined her understanding of strength, community, and responsibility. Walking out of the cafeteria, she passed the hallway where everything had changed 7 months. Earlier, the lockers looked the same, the institutional green walls unchanged, but the energy was completely different. Students moved through the space with easy confidence, their conversations filled with laughter rather than tension. A group of freshman girls walked past, chatting animatedly about an upcoming dance. One of them looked nervous, clearly worried about whether she'd fit in or be accepted. Her friends immediately rallied around her, offering encouragement and support in the casual, automatic way that had become normal at Riverside High, that Lily thought was the real measure of success. Not that she had proven bullies could be defeated, but that kindness had become the default response to vulnerability. Not that she had gained respect through fear, but that the entire community had chosen to value compassion over cruelty. As she headed to her final classes of the day, Lily Zhang, no longer the invisible new girl, no longer hiding her strength, no longer counting the days until escape, walked through the halls of Riverside High School like someone who belonged exactly where she was. And for the first time since her family had started their military journey of constant relocations, she realized she was going to miss leaving a place behind. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.